All right, welcome back. Today's exciting. We'll show you why. I'll show you right now. Clear. That's why today's exciting. You see, if you've been watching my video series, you know that we have been doing a 22 RE swap in a 1980 Toyota pickup. So this video, I'm going to explain everything required to be able to do a 22 RE swap on the wiring side of things. So we picked this engine up. It came with the engine harness. So there are two harnesses. There's one engine harness that plugs into all the sensors and things on the engine, and then it goes back and it plugs into the computer. That's only half of what you need. You also need the computer. The other half of what you need, you actually have to have the body harness to make it work. So if you have a donor truck, or if you don't have a donor truck, I actually was able to yard all this out of the junkyard. A similar year, I was able to yard it all out of the junkyard and make it work. So the donor harness, the body harness we'll call it, it comes with the relay box. You want the relay box because this is where your EFI relays are.
Show us in there.
What's that?
Show us in the relay box.
So this relay box right here, it comes with your starter relay, your EFI relay, your EFI fuse, and some of your main fuses for power. And main ignition fuses and things. So this box is important. When you pull it out of the junkyard, you want this box. When you're at the junkyard, I learned something. Don't cut any wires. It's actually not that hard to pull, especially if somebody pulled the dashboard before you. And if they didn't, you can pull it all through. It's not too bad. So there's a couple plugs up inside of this relay box. You can unplug these plugs, and the harness that goes across the front of the engine, it plugs in right here. You can unplug that. It all gets pulled across. It's super easy to pull. I had to pull it twice. Remember what I said about cutting wires? Yeah, that's why I had to pull it twice. And this part of it, this harness has the wiring for the alternator on it. The engine harness has the wiring for the mass airflow sensor and your igniter and your ignition. If you have a donor vehicle or you're pulling it out of a donor vehicle, it's critical that you pull this piece here with you. And they are a little bit different from year to year, but if you get one for a 22RE, you can make it work. But the body harness comes across here. It goes through the hole in the cab right here. And yes, it's the same on the newer pickups as it is on the 80. It's all the same routing. It goes through the wall right here. And then let's go inside. Look at this. So inside the truck, the wire harness on the donor vehicle, it comes through the firewall right over here on the driver's side by your left foot. It comes through the firewall here. And there's a couple plugs. There's a plug here, and there's a couple plugs on this fuse box. And this fuse box is mounted to the kick panel right here on your donor vehicle.
And that fuse box is new. This is all new.
This is all out of the donor vehicle.
Newer. Yep.
Yeah, this is not out of the 1980. This is all a donor vehicle harness. It's here. And then that harness, it also plugs in here. It continues, this is the hardest part to pull. It's not too bad. Continues across the dashboard and goes down and plugs into the harness, your engine harness. That would be the other harness. Come around that side and I'll show you. I'll crawl in here. So your body harness that you pulled out of the donor vehicle, this is what's really important to have, are these plugs here. These are the ones that come across the dashboard. These plug into your engine harness. So if you were just pull the engine with the harness and the computer, you'd unplug it here. Remember what I said, don't cut anything. And then you have your computer, and that's your engine harness. And the other part of that harness, it goes through the firewall on this side. It goes back up to that relay box and plugs in there. up at that relay box.
Tell us about the fuel pump.
Fuel pump. That's a very important point. Fuel pump relay and the fuel pump wiring is all part of the body harness. It's not part of the engine harness. So there is a fuel pump relay loosely mounted. It's on the passenger side. I actually never unscrewed it. Somebody else had unscrewed it at the junkyard. It's somewhere in the jockey box area, the passenger side. And then there's wiring underneath the passenger seat and floorboard area that goes to the rear of the vehicle. In that wiring, you have a blue wire and a white with a black stripe. That's what runs your fuel pump, those two wires. So it's, yep. Okay. So yeah, so we came through, we grafted it into the stock fuel tank, stock fuel pump. If you're doing it in a Toyota pickup, you can order a tank. This was a Dorman. I'll give you the part number on this tank. If you wanted to bolt this into this one bolts in, it's a 1980. Here's your part number. It's a Dorman part number 576190. It's a 17-gallon tank. We bought it off Rock Auto. That was for a 93 or 94 Toyota pickup, Toyota pickup 4-wheel drive. So that's the critical parts of the harness that you want. The
fuel pump.
Fuel pump.
It's not the same as the old one, right?
No. Fuel pump, for an EFI, you have to have different fuel pressure. There's two different ways you can do this. We went with the stock style fuel pump. We wanted an in-tank fuel pump and a stock fuel pump for this application. That way it is just as reliable as the stock one would be. If you're putting a 22 RE in a completely different vehicle, you can pick whatever tank you want. Those two wires that come from that relay, you can still run a fuel pump with. You run any other fuel pump you want, you can run. But if you're putting it into an old carbureted Toyota, you have to have a solution for a fuel pump. The best way to do it, the most reliable, is an in-tank pump. You may want to pull the wires for the level, for your level sender and stuff, but that's up to you. Anyway, don't cut any wires, unplug everything. If you do cut wires, cut it on the down, like for the fuel pump, if you do cut those wires, cut it down here so you still have your plug, everything, so you still have all the plugs. You want to keep factory plugs because they're really good. Okay, then when you get home with that harness, whether from your donor vehicle or from junkyard, whatever you do, you'll want to start stripping it down. So the first thing I did is take off all of the protective covering, take off all of the tape. When I was taking it off, sometimes the wires would go everywhere. Just take a little black tape or a little zip tie and just kind of keep them bundled together. You want to be able to see absolutely everything. If you have time while you're pulling the harness, label stuff. Hey, this went to the headlight. This went to this headlight. This went to this turn signal, whatever. If you have time when you're pulling it.
Okay, tell us about the starting. Ignition. Want to go to the other side?
Yes, I want to talk about stripping the harness though. You don't have to strip the whole harness down. There's a lot of different things you can do with it. It's up to you. Do you want to cut the headlights out of it? You can cut the headlights out of it. Do you want to cut the heater controls and all that out of it? You can, or you can graft it into your application. That is completely up to you. It's not going to affect the engine starting. It's just a bunch of extra wire. Not going to hurt anything. The key point though is being able to start the vehicle. The older Toyota pickups only have a 3-position key switch, 3-contact key switch. The new one is kind of a double switch where it puts power to, I'll show you. Let's go over here to the whiteboard and I'll explain this. So I drew up the wire diagram here of the two different harnesses. The one that's on the Toyota pickup, the old one, is in red. My new one for the 22RE is in green. So, and the black one's where I tied the two together. So in order to start the 22RE engine, I isolated the the engine harness, the engine and body harness, I separated the two harnesses. So the old truck has one harness and the engine and everything, it runs off a separate harness completely. So in order to start the 22RE, you have a white wire, which is, I think it's on a wiring diagram, it's AM1. And in your normal key switch, you turn that to turn your accessories on, then you can turn your ignition on, and you flip it to start. And there's a second wire coming into that key switch. These are both hot from the battery, by the way, fused. And that one turns on your EFI. So in order to hot wire it to start it, you have to hook your white wire with a red stripe up to your black wire with a red stripe.
Key switch.
That's inside your key switch.
Vehicle key switch. Yep.
Yeah, inside your key switch. You can jumper these two to pretend like you're closing that switch, and then you jumper these two, your white to your starter wire. Those two wires are the only two necessary to make the engine start. That's all we jumped on this one to make it run, to make it start and run. Yes, everything has to be plugged in, including your mass airflow sensor. Ask me how I know. If you don't, it'll just start fire and die, fire and die, fire and die. It won't run. But those two wires, that wire connected solid, and the momentary push button for your starter, those are the only two that you need to start it. And then once you let off that.
Why did you have to use a push button?
Why the push button I had to use because trying to graft, it's two separate switches, and if I put this into here, when I flip to go to start, you lose connection to your ignition. But with an EFI truck, you have to have constant power to your ignition, to your computer, in order to start the truck. If you wired it up the way this was, with carbureted, it won't run the computer because it disconnects power to the computer when you're cranking. And so I had to wire it up with that push button. There's probably other ways to do it, get really fancy with relays and things like that, but just to keep it super simple, we put a push button in. So,
okay, let's go through the mass airflow and the
fuel pump.
O2 sensor, two new things, and a clutch switch.
Yes. Okay, so a couple things that we learned while we were troubleshooting this and trying to get it to start, some lessons learned that you may trip on. Number one, the clutch switch. It's important to keep in that harness, that your donor harness. If you don't jumper that clutch switch, you will get no power to your starter wire when you're trying to start it, or when you're jumpering it. You have to jumper that clutch switch. That was the first thing that we learned.
And always, for safety, hook the clutch switch up.
Yeah.
Or create one if there isn't one.
In case you're wondering, this is my brother Richard. This is my brother Richard's truck. How long have you had this truck?
I've had this since 1993.
It's been off the road since 2000.
Yes.
I'll let you do some math how long it's been on and off the road and figure it out from there. Anyway, he came over for the weekend to help put his truck together. Just hang out. And he's going to be my camera boy for now.
Thanks.
Anyway. You're welcome. All right. Clutch switch, as Richard was saying, the safety side of it, if you put that push button, you hit that button, it cranks the engine. If you jumper that clutch switch. If you're putting this into a rock crawler or something like that, you may want to just put a safety switch on there, just for safety's sake. Or you're putting it in a truck like this, and this one doesn't have a clutch switch. Whether it was removed or whether it never came with one, I don't know. We are going to put one in, because then if you have little kids crawling around the cab and they hit that button and you're in gear, it's going to start moving the truck, whether the key's on or not. So we're going to put a clutch switch in. That's just a safety thing. It's just smart. It's just a smart way to go. Let's see. Mass airflow sensor. This was important. So one key thing for starting the truck is the fuel pump does not run unless you're in the cranking position. And then when you let off the cranking position, the fuel pump stops, unless there's something to tell it to run. The mass airflow sensor, we learned this last night, late trying to get this thing running. The mass airflow sensor, when it senses airflow, the computer then sends power to the fuel pump. That's what allows the engine to run while you're not cranking. So once it cranks, it fires, you can let off. That allows the engine to run. Is there anything else, lessons learned, we learned on this?
No, I think we're good.
I think we're good.
Show us it starting.
So we'll show you starting it. We'll show you how we did this. So in here, we have a little bit of a mess here still. We're gonna get all this cleaned up, don't worry. We're really smart to do temporary. Do a whole bunch of temporary stuff, test everything, make sure your wiring harness is correct before you, oh yeah, those things.
Show us how these work.
Before you do anything permanent, test everything. Be safe about it, make sure your fuses are in, make sure you don't have any bare wires touching things, that kind of stuff, so you don't blow, you don't want to fry your computer, you don't want to break fuses. These little dealy whopper hoppers right here, these are cool. You take a wire, these are really slick. Instead of sitting and twisting, oh, back up a little bit. Okay. So instead of twisting wires together all the time, these things here, where'd you get these?
Amazon.
You got these on Amazon?
Like 10 cents.
Good old Amazon. Get these things 10 cents a piece. I don't know what they're called, but you slide the wire in and it snaps down and it's in. And then you slide your second wire in the other end. Snaps in. Don't use these for permanent. Not a good solution for permanent in a vehicle. But they are excellent for temporary, trying to figure out how to get the thing started. They're awesome. So, that being said, great tip there. I learned that. Okay, so what I was telling you with the wire harness over there on the board.
Clutch switch first.
The clutch switch, right here. So in our donor harness comes your clutch switch. You may want to take the button when you're stripping it. Just go ahead and take the switch off the clutch. Anyway, so we just use a jumper wire to close our clutch switch, right? Like that. That closes your clutch switch, which is the same thing as pushing in the clutch. Right there, okay? Because I'll show you this in just a second, but your push button, the key is off. It'll still crank. You disconnect the clutch switch, you got nothing. It won't crank. That's your safety. It's an important thing to have. But for now, I also didn't put the driveline in the truck. Think about that one. So, right now what we did, this is the only place we actually grafted the two harnesses together. We took our donor body harness, we hooked it in to the truck harness, to where when you turn the ignition key to the on position, it then puts power to it switches the power to your EFI computer.
Your EFI computer is the white wire with the red stripe.
That is your hot from the battery is your white wire with the red stripe, and your power to the computer is the black wire with the red stripe.
Yep.
So that turns your ignition on, your computer on, everything like that, and then you have a push button. Woohoo! Oh yeah, it runs. This is a huge moment for us. I'd let it run if we weren't in a closed garage, and we got the Neighbor Hater 3000 on this, and so yeah, it's a little bit late at night. There's no exhaust. Anyway, but yeah, that's take your safety out. That's it. That's what it takes to make a 22RE run. I'm not going to go through every color wire or what to strip out, what not to. I'll let you figure it out. As you label things, take it apart. If you don't think you need it, you can yank it. What I did is I left them long in case I yanked something I shouldn't have. I also left them long because if I wanted to graft something into this fuse box, I can do that too. I just left them long for now. We may cut them down. But yeah, Leave comments below if you have any questions. I'd be happy to answer them if I can. Get yourself a good wiring diagram. I just used a Haynes manual. I wish I had a good wiring diagram. It would have helped a lot. The Haynes manual was not terribly great. Yeah, O2 sensor. You're going to have to install an O2 sensor. It's important for the engine to run. It's part of your engine harness. But yeah, thanks for watching.